Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of RotoGrinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Go Bowling at the Glen from Watkins Glen International here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Atlanta, Joey Logano, playoff driver, took the win, advancing himself into the round of 12. Logano's second win of the year. So if you're one of those over 1.5 wins bettors, congrats on cashing that for Joey Logano. He took the victory over Daniel Suarez. Suarez, another amazing run at Atlanta. Now top 6 finishes in 5 of the 6 Atlanta races in the next gen era for Suarez. And Ryan Blaney finished third, recovering from an accident that claimed a few drivers. Chris Buescher was involved in there, among others. So Blaney finished third after recovering, getting his car repaired. So Penske, 2 of the top 3. It's a little bit different Atlanta race than the first Atlanta race. Stevie, what were your thoughts on Atlanta number 2?
I miss old Atlanta. Listen, I'm going to keep saying it, but I guess I'll stop saying it. But overall, I miss old Atlanta. I thought the racing was interesting. It was entertaining at times. I think this car is so interesting on this racetrack type. But, I think Fords were strong all day. Blaney and Cindric, I think, flip-flopped the stages where they finished first and second. It was a good points day for Austin Cindric. This is a really good, playoff stretch for him. I had him advancing out of this round, and, obviously I think this was a good weekend for that with his stage points, and I think he's going to be really solid at Watkins Glen this weekend. So happy for Joey Logano, I guess. I'm not the biggest Joey Logano fan. I'm not a hater. Good day for him. I'm really happy for my bets with Christopher Bell. I have a lot of season-long bets on Christopher Bell, so I was glad to see him just finish the race. As much issues as Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. had. Denny, let's talk about Denny really quick, because I just didn't get it. He sat back the whole race to avoid mess, and then was in the mess. And we've talked about this with the new car, with this new Atlanta, you can't run in the middle towards the back of the field. That's where all the wrecks happen. So I know he's a data guy. I just never understood what Denny was doing all race. Maybe the first stage, feeling it out, but what was he doing? He just put himself in a big hole that he didn't need to.
Yeah, it's very weird, because if we look at the stages, 8 of the 10, top 10 in the stage was playoff drivers in stage 1. In stage 2, 8 of the top 10 playoff drivers. So he just handed them a bunch of stage points, let alone finishing points. Of course, he hung out in the back there. He thought something was going to happen. Something did happen. It happened on the final lap to him, right?
Yeah.
So he should have just gone forward and raced. The whole rest of the race was, for the most part, like I said, there was that one kind of minor incident that Blaney got caught up in, ended up fixing his car anyway and finishing third, right? If Denny Hamlin runs that kind of race, he's doing amazing right now. If we look at the point standings, the top 9 drivers in the point standings in the playoffs all finished in the top 10. And they all got some sort of stage points, either in stage 1 or 2. The next 7 drivers in the playoffs, which is Larson, and thank goodness he's okay after that hit he took.
Oh, man.
Larson, Denny Hamlin, Ty Gibbs, Brad Keselowski, Harrison Burton, Martin Truex Jr., and Chase Briscoe all finished 17th or worse. So we literally stratified the playoff standings now from, did you have a good Atlanta finish or did you not have a good Atlanta finish? So hanging back was clearly not the right choice here for Denny Hamlin. And I mentioned, one kind of incident there, which was the Blaney, Buescher, etc. There were a couple other drivers involved. But the other incident was that Kyle Larson incident, single car incident until Chase Briscoe got involved, hitting him because he couldn't avoid Larson. But Larson just got loose, overcorrected, hit the wall. Very glad he's okay.
Yeah, when I initially watched it, I was like, did a tire go down? Because it just snapped on him. He was really fast. I think Kyle Larson was going to be a contender in the race. He had a really good pushing and handling car. Hated it for him. Hated it for Briscoe. I mean, coming off the win at Darlington in really good spirits and just really had nowhere to go. Just absolutely nowhere to go for Chase Briscoe. So hated that. Glad, like you said, I'm glad Kyle Larson's okay. Martin Truex Jr. had the bad day. Harrison Burton had the bad day at the end. We mentioned Denny. We mentioned Brad Keselowski. Ty Gibbs didn't have like the best day either. But like he's kind of in that mix now of like we have these 6 drivers like you mentioned, and I don't even think like Kyle Larson is necessarily like safe. He's lucky he had the point buildup that he did throughout the season, but or do we think like Truex, Burton, Briscoe are in must wins now, like where they're at points wise?
No, I don't think so. I think you can get enough points at Watkins, Glen, and Bristol to make things up, right? I mean, Truex has always been great at the Glen, and he finished second at Bristol earlier this year to his teammate Denny Hamlin. If he does that again, he can point his way back into this
Yeah.
because other drivers will have problems, will have bad races here that are ahead of him. So, I mean, if you're Briscoe, probably, if you're Harrison Burton, probably just because you're not typically pulling off these great finishes. But those would be the only 3 I would think would be in must-win mode. And of those 3, I actually don't even think Truex is necessarily in must-win mode.
Yeah.
But we are on to Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen is a 2.45-mile road course, one of the 2 traditional road courses that NASCAR has raced on for many years until then we started adding some others. And, of course, Circuit of the America now, a classic road course. We did run on the Chicago street course, a little bit different there because of the tight walls and the bumpy streets in Chicago. But Watkins Glen, Stevie, just one of the classic NASCAR tracks. And we do have a new tire this weekend. So before we get to the tire, just talk about racing at Watkins Glen in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of our faster type road courses. It's a track that fall off is usually not a thing, and I mean that's what they're trying to come here with is a tire that's going to generate fall off, and we'll talk about that in a second, like you said. But yeah, I mean Watkins Glen is a road course that I've always enjoyed. You know, obviously it's a road course that we grew up watching because it was one of the 2 that was around for the whole time we grew up as NASCAR fans. So yeah, the racing here is there's like 3 or 4 really good passing zones. You can outbreak people potentially. This car hasn't produced as many passing opportunities as like older cars has. So I think that's what the general idea is with the tire this weekend is, hey, we need to create some passing at Watkins Glen because basically it's been follow the leader or pit strategy to gain positions here.
Yeah, in the next gen era, it definitely has been. And you mentioned, prior to the next gen era, certainly some older cars, you could pass going into turn 1. You could pass into the bus stop. You could pass in the carousel, even if you put a little bumper to them, which is right after the bus stop. You could pass in the next subsequent turns as well. I mean, especially if there's fluid on the track. If you remember the old Marcus Ambrose battle with Brad Keselowski there. But Watkins Glen has produced in the past some amazing racing. I hope we can get back to that because, I mean, it used to produce unbelievable racing. And hopefully this new tire is able to correct that. So let's talk about this. Goodyear is trying out a softer compound. We've seen softer compounds work at some of these other tracks, especially Richmond. Now, this isn't softer compound where we have 2 different compounds. This is just, we're bringing a softer compound, period. And there have been reports, at least on Twitter this week, that Goodyear claims there could be up to 3 seconds of tire fall off. So, first of all, what are your thoughts on the tire? And second, what are your thoughts on how it could or could not impact the racing and or the strategy?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a mix of like tire and playoff drivers wanting stage points as far as strategy because I think you can still short pit. And if you run 2 laps on the tires, I just don't think it's going to make as much difference as what everybody's kind of hoping for. And maybe it does, but are you going to be able to make enough passes to gain that 2 laps of tire back? I think is something that we're going to kind of pay attention to this week. I mean, I hope it works, right? Like at the end of the day, I hope we have a tire that over 25 laps, there's actually 3 seconds of fall off because that will generate passing, make passing and everything a lot more fun to watch. But I think it's a huge advantage to Logano, Reddick, and Daniel Suarez because they did the tire test here and they got a lot of laps here with this like tire setup. I know it was a multiple different kind of tires, but I mean, listen, getting laps at a track is huge. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be strategy and then playoff stage points. Because I mean, if you're Larson, Truex, any of these guys in this point range, I feel like you're just going to maybe Joey Logano is on the opposite strategy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it all depends on how much fall off there is. If there really is 3 seconds of fall off, I don't think you can flip the stages because you're going to be putting 3 laps on the tires for most of the drivers, unless you're right up on the leader. You're going to be putting 3 laps at 2.5 miles a lap on a track that's, compared to an oval, you're going to be a little more abusive on the tires because you're turning left and right and trying to get through different corners and changing loads and stuff on the tires. So 7.5 miles, think about that if it was like Darlington. That would be, five, 6 laps at Darlington. Think how much you've already shredded the tires after 5 laps at Darlington. So it could be a really big issue if there's 3 laps or 3 seconds of fall off over the course of a run. Then you wouldn't be able to flip the stages, and everything would just be points racing for everybody, because that would be the optimal strategy as well. So it really depends. That's why I'm kind of reserving most of my bets this week early on for more conservative bets or just something I see as really big value. And then maybe I'll attack a little bit more after practice and qualifying, because I really do want to get an idea of the fall off. I do also think if there is a lot of fall off, it's going to help the smoother drivers and hurt the more aggressive drivers. So I think it could hurt somebody like an AJ Allmendinger who, knows how to get every last bit out of his car and the tires, but he always seemed to do a little bit worse at Road America. Earlier this year at COTA wasn't quite as good, as COTA has started to generate a little bit more fall off. Back in the day when it was just Glen and Sonoma, he was always better at Glen because it had lower fall off and Sonoma had higher fall off. So just one of those things where I think Allmendinger, if there's a lot of fall off, would probably need a late restart to really have a chance to win this one. Just my thoughts, because, everybody's going to be on the point strategy, which would then be on the optimal strategy as well. So he doesn't even get a strategy benefit. But again, we don't know until we see practice. So I'm reserving my more aggressive bets for post-practice qualifying.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Waiting to bet this week, I think, is a good idea. Like I'm taking a stand, and I'll talk about it as we're like going through my bets like early in the week, and I might add some stuff to be on the opposite side as a little hedge after practice and qualifying. But I don't trust Goodyear enough to produce a tire that's going to fall off 3 seconds. So my thought process is I want drivers not racing for stage points to have an opportunity to win the race, and you'll see that in my bets this week.
There you go. So let's dive into those bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Watkins Glen. We're going to do 4 of those turns, 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on to go bowling at the Glen and dive into turn 1. All right, right-hander into turn 1. Stevie, what do you got for us? Sounds like because we got a right-hander, you got a road course expert.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Shane Van Gisbergen, our boy. I mean, SVG is just, it's crazy. You think back to Chicago last year, he was 60-1 to win the race, and now he's 8-1 to win a road course. I don't think it matters what tire strategy you're on if you're SVG. Like you said, you want a smooth driver. So if the strategy is and the tires are falling off a lot, he's smooth. He's going to be able to maintain his car. He outbreaks everybody. So he's just a guy at 8-1 where I feel like they're going to bring a good car for him. They're trying to show everybody that they didn't make a mistake by signing him for next year. So I'm just kind of betting on the talent. And if the strategy is to pit early, he doesn't have to race for stage points. So I think SVG at 8-1, the number is like kind of tough to swallow. But I think that this is the time to bet it, because if he goes out and he's fast in qualifying, you're not going to get an 8-1 number. And if we think back to Chicago, he was really fast, and like he was going to probably finish top 3 in that race had he not had an issue. So we go to the Glen with some tire fall off where you want to be smooth and fast. He's at the top of my list right there next to Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think SVG, Tyler Reddick both have that kind of ability to adapt to a road course no matter what it is. Like we saw Tyler Reddick, for example, at Road America slaughter the field a couple of years ago in the RCR car. And I think it reminds me a lot of SVG. SVG, of course, was able to manage his tires in the rain and then turning to dry at Chicago Street Course. So definitely some tire management there that was needed that he is able to have displayed before. My turn one pick, I'm going to go to who I think is a really smooth driver, Christopher Bell, 16-1. That just seems way too long. Remember Coda earlier this year, Circuit of the Americas. Christopher Bell was probably going to win that race if his own teammate Ty Gibbs doesn't hold him up. And that was a race that had tire fall off, was Circuit of the Americas. We definitely saw some fall off there. We're projecting at least, I would say that much at Watkins Glen, given the tire change. And Christopher Bell has just always been one of the smoothest drivers in the field. You don't think of him as a guy that's abusing his equipment, wearing his tires out way too quickly. So I think Christopher Bell, 16-1. I mean, we're getting the guy who, at the only other medium higher tire wear natural terrain road course we saw earlier this year, which is Coda, was probably the guy to beat, and we're getting him 16-1.
Yeah, I love Bell. I'm with you. I didn't initially bet this, but I think I'm going to add it to my card because, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. If it is a race where fall off matters a lot and he stays out to get stage points, he's going to be on the optimal strategy in that aspect. So
Yep.
I'm really on the strategy of short pitting is going to be the race winning strategy, and I could be completely wrong, but like I said, it's going to be a good or bad week because that's the strategy I'm thinking in my head. So
that could be your one hedge to the short pitch.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
but yeah, I think that he's the smart hedge though, because like you said, he maintains his stuff. He's fast. He's been really good at the Glen already, like 3rd and 8th with the next gen car. So plus, I'm on Bell, so might as well just keep betting him. I like Christopher Bell a lot.
There we go. All right. So we are through turn one. We're going to go up the S's, dive into the bus stop as our turn 2. All right. Turn 2. You're going again with, you gotta go with these guys that aren't in the playoffs or gotta be on the winning strategy type drivers. Who's the other one? Who's the next one I should say you have?
Yeah, I have Michael McDowell at 14-1. And I think that he might qualify really well. And if the strategy is just stay out and get stage points and be on fast tires, he could potentially do that. Or he could flip the stages if he needs to because he's not running for points anymore. And he's had a ton of speed at road courses since the beginning of last season. So I think he would love to get one more win for Front Row Motorsports before he leaves. I think that this team took a huge shot on him. And I mean, if we look at the road courses this year, 39th, 2nd, and 5th, showing a little bit of value here on McDowell. And I mean, my model's obviously not going to take strategy into effect too much here. So going to bet him at 14-1 and just keep betting on the speed. I mean, again, you look at where he's qualified on these road courses, he's had a lot of speed, and Watkins Glen's been really good for him.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Michael McDowell is a contender for pole position once again this week, and that gives him a chance to run either strategy depending on which one they end up finding as optimal based off of the tires. For me, I'm going to go to a guy that's really good at tire wear tracks, and that's Alex Bowman. He has, a lot of his wins, I should say, and we've talked about this before on Running Hot, have come at high tire wear tracks. Yes, on ovals, but he did just win the Chicago Street Course, managing his rain tires in the drying conditions. So that is huge right there. He finished, inside the top 4 at Circuit of the Americas in a track that has had more tire wear over recent years. And I think Watkins Glen, its best comp right now is Circuit of the Americas, especially with this softer tire Goodyear is bringing. Alex Bowman, I'm going to take him for a top 10 finish at plus 240. Now, he hasn't had great Glen results, which is why I think he's been pushed back in odds. But I think they make up for it this weekend. Hendrick has always been strong here in general. And I think with the potential tire fall off, this could play right in Alex Bowman's hands.
See, I like this because I think my best comp this week is going to be Coda. And I mean, if you look at Coda 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in the 3 races at Coda with the next gen car, and one of those races he would have won had he not got wrecked. So I like this Alex Bowman bet. I didn't even process it in my own head, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I'm gonna tail this one.
Alrighty, so Alex Bowman, top 10 plus 240 is my turn to pick. Stevie going with Michael McDowell to win at 14-1. So we're going to head into that right-hander into the carousel for turn 3. All right, turn 3, Stevie. We're both on this bet. I'm gonna throw a little curveball here. I'm gonna give it out because I'm wearing my amigo Daniel Suarez's hoodie here. We're gonna both be on Daniel Suarez for a top 10 finish at plus 180. You mentioned it earlier. Daniel Suarez did the tire test here, so that certainly is a little bit of a benefit. I would think to him. He's also just been really good at road courses in general. Obviously, won Sonoma back in 2022, back when it was higher tire wear. He finished fifth at Watkins Glen that year. So remember back in 2022, he led the whole first stage of Circuit of the Americas before getting caught up in some mess by doing the stay out strategy and then putting himself back in the field. So Daniel Suarez is very good at road courses, and I think that little bit extra already knowing what's going on with the tires will help him grab that top 10 finish. What do you think?
Yeah, so I don't think strategy matters because I think he's going to be fast, and I think that he's going to go out and he's going to try to be in contention for stage points because he put himself in a really good position last week, right? Like he's plus 22. He had the exact race that he needed, got stage points in stage 2, finished second in the race. Everything worked to plan for Daniel Suarez. And if we think back to Sonoma before they repaved, I mean, he was fantastic there. So when you're looking at the higher tire wear road courses, Daniel Suarez is up at the top of the list. So me and you both on this one. A top 10 is one that you don't necessarily have to worry too much about strategy or fall off early in the week. I might add his outright after practice and qualifying because I'm very, very high on Suarez this week.
Same. I love potentially taking his outright this weekend as well. But again, the only outright I have is the Bell one so far, but that's just so far. So 3 turns down. We're going to head into those final left, right here at Watkins Glen for turn 4. All right, final turn, Stevie. Another top 10 bet for you. This one on one of those outside looking in, still in the playoffs, but one of those ones we talked about might be in a must-win situation. Who you got?
Yeah, I've chased Briscoe for a top 10 at plus 450. I like this number. I think this number is really good when you're thinking about what happened to Briscoe last week. Out of the race really early. We talked about it. He got involved in the Larson wreck, really nowhere to go for him. And now he comes into this weekend, I mean, minus 21, and they haven't had the speed to go up there and contend for stage points and point their way back in. If you're Chase Briscoe and you're this team, let's just go. I mean, everybody does something. We're going to do opposite. And like, could that lead to a win? Yeah. I mean, Chase Briscoe is someone that has showed us plenty of speed on road courses. I think it has a higher probability for a top 10, and I'm showing value in my head on this. This isn't a model bet. This is a Stevie thinks that Briscoe's going to be contrarian, and I want to get it plus 450 for a top 10. I mean, that is where I'm at when it comes to Chase Briscoe. I just feel like they have to do opposite of every other playoff driver, and I think Harrison Burton's in the same situation, but I think Briscoe actually has a better chance to pull it off.
I agree with you. I think Briscoe has a much better chance to pull it off. And if there is that kind of opposite strategy, we do have the flip the stage strategy. Certainly Chase Briscoe is going to go on the flip the stage strategy in must win mode, which gives him a really good chance to finish inside that top 10. So right there with you, it wouldn't be a model based play. It would be that's a strategy based play that we think could work out for Chase Briscoe. He's been good at road courses. I mean, he's been in the mix several times, especially at Circuit of the Americas, which again, we're saying is potentially the best comp. So Briscoe, top 10 finish plus 450 for Stevie in turn 4. For me, I'm going to go Austin Cindric for a top 10 finish at plus 240. And when I look at Austin Cindric, another guy that just isn't overly aggressive, but that may benefit him with tire fall off. He has traditionally been good at the higher tire wear road courses. Road America, he had a couple good runs. One year he broke an axle, I think it was. But by and large, ran really well at Road America. Also ran well at Sonoma. He had a 5th place finish at Sonoma his rookie year in the Cup Series. Always ran well at the high tire wear tracks in the Xfinity Series as well in terms of the road courses. I think not Chase Briscoe, Austin Cindric, another Ford driver here, is in a great spot if there is more tire wear to just pick up stage points. And if he wants potentially flip, if there's different kind of strategies going on, but I think obviously the safer play for him is, given his point standing, to just go with the points stage finishes. But if that ends up being the optimal strategy, Certainly he has the potential to be a top 5 car, as we've seen just on speed in the past. And I think that tire fall off could potentially play in his favor here. So I like Austin Cindric for a top 10 finish plus 240.
I don't want to go too much on a rant, but I think it was a huge mistake for Penske not to send Cindric, or Ford to send Cindric for the tire test. I think that Logano was going to be in a good spot. Blaney was going to be a good spot after Atlanta. Both of those guys are just so good at drafting tracks that, like, I feel like it was a huge mistake not to send Cindric. But hey, to each his own. He put himself in a great place last week. A lot of stage points, really good finish. And now he goes to a racetrack where he should finish inside the top 10. I'm with you on this one. I feel like the speed is going to be there for Austin Cindric. Like, we haven't really talked about him a lot on road courses over the last few years, but I mean, this guy has a cup ride because of road courses. I mean, he is very good at that, and I feel like he's just going to benefit from a tire fall off here.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one of those where I'm like potentially considering is outright 40-1. I think there's even a 50-1 out there if you have Circa in those few states that have Circa. So Austin Cindric for top 10 finish is my turn 4 pick. So we've completed our lap at Watkins Glen. Only one thing left to do, and of course, that's driving the victory lane. And this was my favorite driver, I think, potentially of the weekend, just for a lot of the things I've mentioned. Great at managing tires, great at road courses in general. Also could just be on the optimal strategy if there is a differing strategy. So, Stevie, what do we have as our victory lane pick?
Yeah, we're going to Chris Buescher for a top 10. Like, this is a guy that, I mean, if we look at the next gen era, especially the last year and a half on road courses, he ranks inside the top 5 in speed on road courses. So a guy that's just consistently finishing inside the top 10, like you said, like, this isn't like a partners track or teammates track either. Like, he's not going to be pushing Brad Keselowski around the racetrack. You could tell last week he was doing everything he could to help Keselowski. Mm-hmm. And we kind of, thought about that was going to be the thing. So Buescher can kind of do his thing this week. I think he's going to qualify well, and I think he's going to race well. And this has been a track where, 9th and 7th with the next gen car. And I think we see him run up inside the top 10. If the strategy is short pitting, he's not running for points anymore. Go out and get a win if you can. And that helps Keselowski too, because he's -1 to the playoff point. He doesn't need like a Martin Truex Jr. or Chase Briscoe to win a race, or Ty Gibbs or Denny Hamlin. So Buescher can help his teammate by winning this week.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And, 30-1 out there I've seen on Chris Buescher. I really like that. That may be a second one I add because he's kind of strategy independent, right? Like, if the optimal strategy is everybody has to stay out because the tire fall off is so great, that's fine because he's really good here. He's really good at road courses. He's really good at tire management. So he has a chance to win that way. And if the strategy is flip the stages, well, he's going to be a stage flipper. So I think either way it plays out in Chris Buescher's favor. So 30-1.
I got it at 28. I mean, I bet a half a unit at 28 last night. But I mean, if you can get it at 30-1, I like that as well. So obviously, it's better than.
I think I'm probably going to end up making that my second outright before practice and qualifying. Haven't done it yet, but make sure to follow me in the Action Network app. Also, make sure to follow Stevie in the Action Network app so you can see when we do track any other bets we may not have given out here on Running Hot. But that is going to do it. Thanks for listening to the Go Bowling at the Glen episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back next week as we talk bets for the Bass Pro Shops night race at Bristol Motor Speedway, one of the best races of the year, typically. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back next week on Running Hot from Action Network.